Hey there, I'm Tony DeCopel. This is The Uplift. We got a great show for you, a great cast of characters as well. Among them, these, a young athlete who suffered a devastating injury. His life changed forever, but that has not stopped him from pursuing his passions. Also, a woman who finds herself taking work home because she can't say no to an animal in need. And a researcher trying to answer one of the great mysteries of the whole wide world. Do dogs have their own language? Plus, a full circle moment between an officer and the baby he rescued 24 years ago. Who did that baby become, and how did he re-enter the officer's life? It was at the perfect time. And David Begnaud has a story about an unlikely friendship between a ghostwriter and a man reluctant to have his life story written down at all. Hey there, welcome to The Uplift, the show that lifts you up for at least the next 30 minutes. You, and on a day like this, me as well. We're going to begin with a connection between a police officer and a baby he helped rescue more than 2 decades ago. Who did that baby boy become? Who did he grow up to be? Steve Hartman has the story.
Retired South Bend, Indiana Police Lieutenant Gene Eister says he can't drive past this apartment complex without reliving that day.
That was one of the strangest calls I think I've ever had. We have a found baby in a box. Yeah, you always wonder, what happened.
A newborn, abandoned in a common hallway. It was 24 years ago, just before Christmas. And for Gene, the case of that baby boy Doe, swaddled in cardboard and blankets, didn't end after the child got to the hospital.
No, I went back with a teddy bear. Just a symbol. Let everyone that walked past know that he was cared about.
And you never forgot?
Nope. None of it.
For more than 2 decades, he wondered what became of this boy. Unfortunately, records were sealed, so there was no way to find out. Until a few weeks ago, when Gene got a phone call from a fellow officer. Guy said, "Remember that case, the baby left in the cardboard box? Well, you're not going to believe this."
And I thought, well, what? And he says, he's sitting next to me. I said, he's what? He's my rookie.
Meet Officer Matthew Hegedus Stewart. After his rescue, Matt was placed for adoption. He always knew he'd been left in a box, but only connected the dots to Gene after joining the department. Today, he wears the same uniform Gene did and patrols the exact same neighborhood.
Full circle moment. That hit home. I can only imagine from his point of view.
What it means?
Yeah.
He really can't imagine.
How you been? Good, how are you?
Because what to Matt may feel like coincidence, to Gene feels divined. Their reunion, this new friendship, it's all happening just a few months after Gene's only son, Nick, died unexpectedly at the age of 36.
So the timing couldn't have been any better to help fill a void that I've had to deal with.
24 years ago, Gene was called to be there for a child in need. Now, the child is set to return the favor. And whether it's a coincidence or not, the result is undeniably great police work. Steve Hartman, on the road in South Bend, Indiana.
It's a great story. Coming up, how did an 86-year-old man and a 29-year-old woman get to be friends? Stick around, find out. Plus, what do you think? Do dogs speak a language of their own? You're going to hear from a researcher aiming to answer that question in the affirmative, I hope, after the break. We introduce you now to a researcher hoping to answer an age-old question that many pet owners have. Do dogs talk? Nicole Nielsen of CBS Texas has the answer.
If you've ever wondered what this means, we might be one step closer to finding out.
You can see that they all sound very similar, and they're used at about the same context.
Kenny Zhu is a professor of computer science at the University of Texas at Arlington, who is dedicated to uncoding the mystified language of man's best friend.
I've been fascinated by how intelligent they are, And I was always wonder whether they actually have language.
He's currently using machine learning to translate dog sounds in phonetic representations and eventually words. He showed me how it works.
Yeah. So you can listen to each and every one of the phonemes. So this spectrogram actually shows you the frequency and their strength.
By collecting barks from different sources and stripping away other noises, he then catalogs the sounds and segments them into pieces like syllables and assigns each a symbol similar to our alphabet. The project is legit and backed by a 3-year, $483,000 grant. He says the answers couldn't be more important to the future of understanding and communicating with all animals we coexist with.
It boils down to, facilitate better communication, better understanding between different species, and ultimately we just want to have a better world.
So far, he's transcribed about 10 hours worth of barks into meaning. He's found dogs in different parts of the world speak differently too.
Indeed, we are still in a very early stage of the research. There's going to be a lot of challenges.
Only the beginning of the discoveries to come. In Arlington, Nicole Nielsen, CBS News, Texas.
That is that rare story where I want weekly updates. I am fully invested. Thank you very much for that. All right. When Jenny Smith brings home work, it's usually not office work. In fact, it's never office work. She takes in living creatures, and in some cases, she becomes their surrogate mom. Here's CBS Boston's Lisa Hughes.
Hi, babe. You're sleeping? When Jenny Smith takes work home, it's a commitment. These two babies are now in her care.
Yes, I'm a raccoon mom.
They fell from a ceiling at Wellesley College. Jenny's feeding them cat food, an offering they're not too happy about.
Oh, don't get mad at me. I'm sorry.
The visitors may be angry, but Jenny's a problem solver, coaxing a wayward goat back to her Holliston farm, cuddling chickens.
Only 2 of my chickens are named.
Even caring for wild animals that won't leave. It suits her.
Probably just because I like working with animals, being with animals, helping people with their animals.
The perfect skill set for her day job. Jenny is Wellesley's animal control officer, freeing and saving a lot of wild animals who make up roughly half the 4,000 calls she gets every year. And the busy summer season is most gratifying.
That warm, fuzzy feeling inside when you get to help the wildlife.
Right now, she's on a mission to reunite those 2 baby raccoons with their mother. She baits a trap for the adult, only to get a call that someone hears Mama inside the building.
We're like, what's back? I think it might be back. Back? What's back? In the bathroom, scratching above my head while I was using the toilet.
Jenny doesn't find the raccoon in the men's room or the ceiling where she suspects the babies fell through. But that doesn't stop her from checking every room in the science building. Every drafty space could be a nook for hiding. Mom is nowhere to be found. But Jenny's track record this week is pretty good.
No kissy sounds today?
Lucy was also a rescue, a parakeet flying wild that landed in Jenny's life when it got too cold outside. Now she's her office mate and a success story. Back on the farm, Jenny's making a plan for the raccoons.
Tomorrow, if Mom still hasn't caught, I'll pull out a bigger kennel to have them in temporarily so they have a little bit more room rather than just the travel back and forth kennel.
Their lives in the wild depend on finding Mom, but until then, these babies couldn't be in better hands.
Coming up next, you're going to meet the athlete who is training for a marathon, even though it may be a little different than the races he's used to. Mason Brandstratter has always been an athlete, so when a tragic accident changed his life forever, he did not give up on sports, he adapted. Here's Caitlin O'Kane with his story.
He's always been an athlete, but 3 years ago, at just 17 years old, Mason Brandstratter's active lifestyle was changed forever.
I was going for an ordinary day of downhill skiing, but this time it was a lot different. I remember thinking right as I left the jump, I'm going a little fast, and that was the last thing I remember before everything went black.
He broke his T12 vertebrae and was paralyzed. An avid runner, soccer player, and skier, Mason couldn't wrap his mind around the fact he may never walk again.
In the ICU, multiple doctors came into my room and said, Mason, you might not be able to walk again. And in the eyes and mind of somebody who was 17 and I had no idea what was going on, that was devastating.
He could have been pessimistic, but he says his parents raised him to focus on the good. And while in rehab at Craig Hospital in Denver, he started applying that positive mindset.
The first time I got in a wheelchair in rehab, I felt so free. And we have this video of me with the biggest smile ever, and I couldn't contain it. In this really hard situation, you're given freedom and independence, and I've always been so grateful for my wheelchair. And people look at the wheelchair and say, you know, that sucks, like it's awful to be limited to using a wheelchair, but this wheelchair doesn't limit me, it actually is my freedom.
After rehab, Mason returned home to Minnesota, where he became homecoming king. And after graduating high school, he decided to go back to Colorado, enrolling at the University of Denver, which is nearby Craig Hospital, a place he now visits not as a patient, but as a mentor. Still, he says being in a wheelchair is not easy, and it takes him longer to do most things people take for granted. But that hasn't prevented him from living life and playing sports, even though he can only take a few steps here and there.
Around a year and a half after my accident, I had come to the point of realizing that walking was not going to be a very functional thing for me to keep pursuing. And it was time to look into everything else the wheelchair world had to offer. And I had all of these people giving me offers to come play adaptive sports and try them out, but I was pushing it back. And I finally realized it's time to just live life and experience all of these opportunities that are being presented to me. And when I started saying yes, that's when things really changed for me.
Mason is now embarking on a new athletic challenge, a marathon. This summer, he'll return to his hometown for the race. But it's not the finish line of his journey to inspiring others. It's just the start.
When I was 17, on my way home from a fishing trip with my dad, I remember asking him and telling him that I really had this dream of helping people, but I had no idea how I would get there. 2 days following telling him that, I woke up in the ICU and the doctors informed me that I was paralyzed.
After the accident, he realized he now has a way to help others, sharing his journey and message of optimism on social media.
At the start, I wanted to find people like me, and then it just kept evolving and more people caught on to my story. People that weren't paralyzed started being inspired, and I just loved doing it and kept putting out all of the things that I thought were ordinary. You know, this is just my life now. All the sports I do, basketball, cross-country skiing, tennis, surfing, you know, it's just normal.
There's no doubt the accident changed his life, but it put him on a new track to help others.
There were a couple moments where people have reached out to me and said, I used your method to do something, and it really changed my life, changed how I interacted with the world, and changed my perception of this new normal, living in the wheelchair, or just living life with adversity. There's been multiple moments where I realized that my dream of helping people has come true, and I'm living it out right now.
Caitlin, thank you very much. Up next, David Begnaud. Yeah, David Begnaud introduces us to a ghostwriter who helps people record their own stories, and the man who was reluctant to share his life with her, that is, until they met in person and formed a very close bond.
And he shocked me because within minutes of meeting him, it's like his resolve just melted away. And I felt like we had known each other for so long.
Olivia Savoy, 29 years old, a ghostwriter. She helps people record their life stories, and one of her clients stands out and above all the rest. David Begnaud, who also stands out and above all the rest, reveals that she and an 86-year-old man formed what can only be described as an unlikely friendship.
In this tiny building on the bank of a Louisiana river, the secrets of scores of people are kept tight in the care of Olivia Savoy. She's a ghostwriter who has written life stories on behalf of 50 people and preserved them privately in little books.
Whether I've interviewed a farmer or a philanthropist, they all have a story that's invaluable to their family.
Stories can be passed down. That's how it's been done. Why a book?
So, over time, our stories get lost. If I ask you to tell me a story about your great-great-grandfather, you might not know any. Like, do you know how your grandparents met?
I do not.
So that's why a book, I find. It's a way to safely store memories over time. And photographs. We curate their most cherished photos, too, so that they're never lost.
Only close family get one of very few prized copies. We know only a few things about them. One man who adopted 5 children commissioned a book from Savoy so he could read it to his wife as Alzheimer's slowly took her away. Dan's book was placed in his wife's casket because that was a final wish from her. We do know all are about people who toward the end of their lives let their guard down. To tell this 29-year-old writer what made them, what mattered, mistakes and all.
Does your work give you an appreciation for age?
My work makes me not afraid of age at all, and definitely appreciate it and the wisdom that comes with it.
And that is where 86-year-old Fred Volman comes in.
He didn't want a life story book, but his children did. So he humored them, and he met with me, and I wasn't sure how that would go, because in the past, everyone was always so eager to sit in on interviews, and he wasn't so excited about it.
Fred is a retired businessman, an avid pilot still, who played football in college. A father of 5, he lost his first wife to cancer, then remarried, and together there are 33 grandchildren.
And he shocked me, because within minutes of meeting him, it's like his resolve just melted away. And I felt like we had known each other for so long.
And how long ago was that?
4 years.
In 4 years, Olivia and Fred have developed their own story, and it is one of an unlikely friendship.
We talk a lot, and I've become interested in her entire family. When she got pregnant, she told me she was pregnant. I watched the baby, and she has 2 children now and a wonderful husband. And we follow each other, not on a daily basis, but very often telling of, things that are happening to us, what's happening good, what's happening bad.
In writing her books, Olivia sometimes receives written reflections from family members. One came from Fred's son, Willie, and it turned out to be extraordinarily special.
I didn't tell you at the time that what Willie sent me was so different than what I've ever received from anyone, because it was so poetic and so beautiful and so just singing you praises.
You see, Willie died suddenly, jogging. That was a year after Olivia finished Fred's book. And Olivia had something that only a grieving father should have.
It felt like a living eulogy. It was that profound. It was poetic. It was beautiful. And I remember receiving it and thinking, wow, Fred's as great as I believe him to be, according to his son.
David, I might not be able to read the whole thing.
It's okay.
I'm a sentimental person.
Read what you can.
I remember him as always being the smartest man in the room. I remember him as being generous without hope of reward. I remember him as someone who doesn't let discomfort get in the way of obligation. I remember him as a stern but loving dad.
It is in sharing what is so deeply personal that they now say has cemented their friendship.
I think both of us know that age is just a number, and we had a connection and things in common, and we cared about each other, and so why not be friends?
There's something about you that I think finds older people more interesting?
Yes. Most of my friends are north of 60. Since I was a little girl, I'd go to nursing homes and play the harp.
Olivia believes that her special friendship with Fred is a story that needs to be heard.
So I wanted to write about how two people who seemingly should have nothing in common can become friends. I wanted to explain how we just had a connection, a bond, how we shared in each other's joys and each other's sorrows, had a few common interests, and just became friends.
Olivia Savoy, the ghostwriter, keeping the human spirit alive.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Begnaud. That is our show. I hope it brightened your day. I hope it lifted you up. If for some reason it didn't, press play again. Those reruns, totally free. I'm going to go find some good news.